YouTube Ozic, go in there. Go Nows is back. So in a somewhat recent video, we graded and ranked all the head coaching hires this 2024 offseason. So now in this video, I'm going to talk about coordinators. My favorite coordinator hires, interesting ones, and questionable ones. We're not going to talk about every single hire, just the ones that really stand out to me in three different tiers. So excited about this. Check out the head coaching video if you haven't seen that. We also have trade, free agency, draft videos already up. More to come. All kinds of coverage here for the NFL in the offseason. So join us. Help us get to 100K. I'll be much, much appreciated if you can subscribe. Check out our Twitter as well. Links in the comments for anything you look for. The best coordinator hires. So I actually ranked these top 5, and there may be surprises in here. I like Mike Zimmer a lot to the Cowboys. I think it's perfect. Mike Zimmer is a really good defensive coach. I know he took a little bit of a break. Not really worried about that. I know his last, rodeo with the Vikings didn't go great. Yeah, I think he was kind of losing the team because he's a very strict coach, as a head coach, and he's not really he's not really an offensive-minded coach, and his offensive philosophy is just really, really old school. So that's who he brought in. That's the style of offense they ran. But the Vikings had some pretty good teams, but doesn't change that he is a very, very good defensive coach. He had the best third down defense in the history of the NFL. You look at the Vikings defense when he's gone, a little bit better this year, but still they missed Zimmer on terms, not in general, but in terms of defense. I think he's a good fit. Going to run a similar 4-3 defense as Dan Quinn. The Cowboys have been maybe one of the better man coverage defenses, but it's become so predictable when they get to the playoffs that it's a totally different ballgame. Zimmer's going to run a bit more zone coverage, so this is good. You add a little bit more of a mixture in there. He is an old school guy, but his style of defense is kind of being brought back. Some of those sim pressures, different ways of getting pressure, disguising blitzes. It's kind of making a return. So it's like kind of an old school, new school mixture for Mike Zimmer. So the Cowboys defense actually could get better in the bigger games under Mike Zimmer. He's going to need to get them better at the linebacker position, obviously. He's going to need to find a better interior defensive lineman, but he's going to have a lot of fun with Micah Parsons in the secondary, the players in the secondary. Their jobs actually could become easier. So I think bottom line, he's a proven, really good defensive coach. So I really like to hire. It was kind of a 1A, 1B situation. I really love the hire of Ryan Nielsen, defense coordinator now for the Jaguars. He was with the Falcons last year. First year with the Falcons defense went from one of the worst to a pretty good one. And they were kind of stuck at one of the worst for a while there. So he really improved that defense, the way it's called. Not an easy defense to go against. A lot of different looks. So I really liked what he did in Atlanta. But then going to Jacksonville, Caldwell wasn't cutting it for me. Like he struggled last year as a defensive play caller, just being predictable. And that's kind of the opposite of what Nielsen is. So I think it works for them, and he's going to value, like they're already pretty set stopping the run. But he's gonna value where they're weak. Like he's gonna value like playmaking ability in the back end. Getting those safeties better. I think he's gonna get more out of the pass rushers as well. So the Jaguars defense gets better just by hiring Ryan Nielsen. So that's a big one. I like Zach Robinson, the offense coordinator for the Falcons now. He's coming from the Rams, so that McVay tree. It's a little bit of a mystery. Nobody really knows, like, how is he as a play caller? We don't really know, but he's learned under McVay. He's been in a good system. It's worked out, who's come from that McVay tree. It's really worked out, and it's a guy that, played the game not that long ago, and it's a likable guy, and it seems to be the case around the NFL. So I like his chances of being a successful play caller, but I think it's perfect for what the Falcons needed to that style, that system, that style of offense. Guys that can develop and coach quarterbacks because they're a quarterback away. So that was very important after, thinking they may go Belichick, if not an offensive coach for a head coach. And they didn't do that, but they still are able to land him. I think that's pretty big. A lot of people probably don't like this hire, but I like Arthur Smith to the Steelers. Arthur Smith, a lot of Falcons connection here. We just talked about a new Falcon. Ryan Nielsen was with the Falcons. Arthur Smith was with the Falcons, but I just realized that. But Arthur Smith, it didn't work out as a head coach. That's fine. I think people get it wrong a little bit, though. People blame him fully for the offense when really it was a quarterback issue. Now, he deserves the blame for just insisting on Ritter and not thinking he can get better and not valuing the position more, he definitely deserves to get ripped a ton for that. So and that was a big decision for him. That was a fail. But I thought he called a good offense. That teams seemed to they'd seem to move the ball better than expected, better than you think. Ritter would throw for a decent amount of yards sometimes, I think, because of the system, and then he would make a bad decision in the worst possible time. And then other people, really high on Bijan or had Bijan on their fantasy team, and they're pissed that he's not getting the ball more, and they can't comprehend that Bijan, the electrifying running back, is like sometimes splitting carries with Algier. They just can't get that. But if you watch the games, there was times where, Robinson would have a fumble or he wasn't seeing and hitting the hole like he should be, and Algier was the hotter hand, or Cordero Patterson down the stretch. Who's their best running back? It's Bijan Robinson, but it was really a lot of who's working right now, who's on their game, and I can't really, not 100% of the time agree with him, but I can't really fully blame Arthur Smith for that stuff. So I think people look too much into that. Like, a lot of those people had Bijan on their fantasy team, though. They're just pissed that, I think it was one of those situations. But if you watch the games, you realize he's kind of going with who's hot rather than cold, who's working right now. So his background with Tennessee, I thought he did a great job calling plays for Tennessee. And Tennessee has had a rough go, since Mariota days, maybe before then, with rapid musical offensive coordinators, just going crazy, going through them like crazy. And the one that really looked good was Arthur Smith. And that, I remember the Titans were arguably the best team of the regular season and heading into the playoffs that last year with Arthur Smith. Got the most out of Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry and that team. The offensive line was playing much better. The Falcons' offensive line was starting to dip down. Then Arthur Smith got there. It actually got better. So Steelers, I think, need that. I think he's gonna simplify things for the quarterback. The quarterback just can't turn the ball over like a madman. He's gonna help the offensive line for sure. He's gonna help get the most out of Najee Harris. I think it's a really good hire. People will disagree. I think it's a really good hire. And speaking of the Titans, how about Denard Wilson? He's been in the league for a bit, and he's been a pretty good option for a bit. And then his latest is being with the Ravens, learning from Mike McDonald in that defense and coaching in the secondary. And they, what they did with Kyle Hamilton, and they've been beat up at corner over the year. Marlon Humphrey's been beat up, and he's not the same as he used to be. And they have that good of a pass defense because it's different, it's unique. I think he's got a lot of experience, Wilson, but he's also gathered like these different styles of defense and styles of players, and he's been around that and he's coached that. So it felt like he could have got a job a long time ago. So I think it's a good hire. For the Titans there. So he makes the top 5. So those are my favorite coordinator hires. Once again, we did do a head coaching video, but here's interesting coordinator hires to me. And they could go either way, I guess. I think Cliff Kingsbury is a little bit better of a hire than you think. He took a lot of blame for the Cardinals, which he should. If you're the head coach, you take a lot of blame. But there was a lot of times where he got blamed for some stuff that, like, fourth down decisions, and sometimes wasn't on him, but I just didn't think that was great. I think the play was there. The decision and the play, design, and call was there. I think it was poor execution. I actually saw more of that rather than bad decision by the coach. That's what I was saying at the time, too. He didn't have full control of his team. That was kind of more of the issue. He also would, I guess, kind of stick to his script a little bit too much, or to his original game plan. He was kind of a little afraid to branch off of it based on what was good. Yeah, you just got to understand situational football a little bit more. But I actually think he's a pretty good offensive coach for today's era. He's not great. He's better than you think, though. And with the Commanders in the driver's seat to get a good young quarterback fresh out of college, whether it's any of the top guys, I think it's a decent option to have. If he's the head coach, I don't like the hire, but he's the offense coordinator. And you got Dan Quinn, who's more of an old school guy, so now you got kind of a new school guy here to kind of mix in there. I think it's pretty good. Packers defensive coordinator, defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley from Boston College. He was their head coach, and that was kind of out of nowhere, like a shocking, definitely intriguing, interesting hire. And at first glance, I was like, random hire, like they needed to get better. Joe Barry was brutal during the year, but the playoffs actually was pretty good. I still agree with moving on from. But the playoffs, they did a pretty good job. I thought he got more out of that defense than I thought he would. But still the right move. But you for sure need to get better. You get this guy from Boston College who struggled a little bit. And maybe that's more of just a recruiting disadvantage. And then when he was in the NFL before that, he was, just worked with defensive backs. So does he really have this level of experience? So it's like, this is pretty underwhelming. The more and more I think about it, the more I like it, actually. I like that he has experience as a head coach, even though he didn't do great over there. But college and NFL is a little different. It's a lot harder for guys like this at Boston College, especially where college football is heading. It's a lot different these days. It's more of a recruitment type thing. So and I like that he has that college background too. That's kind of where the NFL is heading, using more players in the secondary. It's more and more every year, more and more it's looking like college defense out there, but just at NFL talent level, with the skill out there of the NFL. And then when he did coach defensive backs, pretty good coach, and he was with the 49ers, and then you hear all these players speaking very highly of him, and these days, that's not a huge thing, but it means something. Because these days, a lot of these players really aren't afraid to say, they're not afraid to throw the coach under the bus. It's crazy, but so that's pretty good as well. And I think the Packers kind of bring in the new school type guy with a background in multiple different things, college, NFL, coaching, secondary, and that's big too. I think it's more so when it comes to how the secondary plays, how the quarterback plays. It's more on the actual quarterback. How the receivers play, it's more on the actual receivers. When it comes to the secondary, I think it's on more of the coaching. And getting a guy with defensive backfield background, I think it's pretty big. And it has the college and NFL background. Bears hired Shane Waldron. That was a pretty interesting one because, they had the first pick in the NFL draft that could take a quarterback. And he helped Geno Smith, not this past season, the year before. It was a little off this year, but, had a balanced, explosive offense. He knows what good players look like, obviously talented players. So I think that helps the Bears overall. He's a little off, last year. Play calling in crucial situations was questionable. So it's an interesting hire here, especially with the Bears having that first pick and possibly taking a quarterback. Seahawks hired Ryan Grubb, who was coming from college, offense coordinator at Washington, who was very explosive this year. They had some star players on that team, though. So is it the coach? Is it the players? I guess he knows what those talented players look like. He knows where the league's kind of heading. It's an interesting one. Definitely interesting. Chargers hired Jesse Minter as defense coordinator, who's with Michigan, their defense coordinator. It's not a big splash hire. It's kind of being swept under the rug a little bit. Just kind of Harbaugh brought one of his guys. But I think it's a little bigger than that. Obviously he coached a really good defense over there. Harbaugh knows, who can coach and who can't. He's on his staff for a reason. And Mike McDonald was the Michigan defense coordinator before that. And he went to the Ravens. Now he's the head coach of the Seahawks. He did a hell of a job. So pretty good. Chances is pretty good here. And the Eagles hires Kellen Moore. It's interesting because I didn't think he was going to get a job. I guess it's not that surprising. But, coaching the Cowboys 2 years ago. Now the offense coordinator with the Eagles. That makes it interesting. But it's mainly interesting because I do think the Eagles get better technically because it was kind of a disaster last year with Kellen Moore. But I did not love the job he did with the Chargers. Underwhelming. But the biggest thing was players did not look prepared. They looked like they'd never seen things. Mainly with the offense line and picking up different, pressures or figuring out reads pre-snap. They just were not prepared. And a lot falls on multiple coaches, but a lot falls on the offense coordinator, Kellen Moore. And the Chargers were very disappointing. So it's not the best hire in the world, but technically they get better. It's going to be interesting seeing Moore coach the Eagles, not the Cowboys. And then Vic Fangio, who was once a legendary defensive coach, but just so old school. And there's some old school coaches that work right now, and is his defense working? I know the Dolphins did get really beat up, but there's some complaints from the Dolphins players that it's like too predictable and too old school. And then he helped the Eagles in the playoffs a year ago, and the defense, didn't look as good maybe in the Super Bowl. I can't really put a lot on that. So these are interesting hires. I'm not in love with them, but I think they get better. They have to get better with these. And then we knew they were going to get worse with their hires last year. I think they get better, but are they going to be as good as they were 2 years ago? That's the thing there. And then questionable hires, really hires I don't love. Saints hiring Clint Kubiak. I really don't love that. The Vikings more than a few years ago hired a legendary Gary Kubiak to be their offense coordinator, and he brought his son Clint Kubiak in. and then pretty quickly, because Gary Kubiak was, he was done. He was old. He's old. He just didn't feel like coaching anymore. Clint Kubiak kind of took over there, and the play calling was brutal. Like, it was bad. It was some of the most predictable, too much running and just too much too much predictable play calling. Really, what it was, and it was stale. It was boring. It was too old school. Like, he's more like, what Gary Kubiak. He's a little smarter, obviously, but would his offense work these days? That's kind of the question. The positives, maybe that was so bad that he learned from it, and then he got to learn from Kyle Shanahan this year in the 49ers. Obviously, he didn't have a lot of control of how that offense was called, really none. It's a very underwhelming hire for the Saints to me. So, of course, he's got to be better than he was when he was in Minnesota, but the play calling was so brutal, that year. So, and it was just a one-year thing, and it was rough. It was rough. So, they're going to get those running backs going a little bit more, but I think he's got to be better than what he last was. But I don't know if this is something that's going to really get Derek Carr going either. Like, you needed that, so I really don't like that hire. Chargers getting Greg Roman. I don't hate it, I guess. It's a little questionable, though, because the Ravens were better without him, but then they had the main fault of the game the Ravens lost against the Chiefs was offense coordinator, offense play calling, decision-making, so I guess that's still a thing, but it definitely was better without him. The main thing with him was his play designs. I didn't have an issue with his play calling. I didn't have an issue with his game plan. Play designs were stale, like high school level stuff, and then receivers running the same routes, running to the same part of the field. And yeah, sometimes it's the receiver's fault, but it happens so much. It's like, okay, a lot of it is on that offense coordinator. So, and how does this... It's kind of to be determined, because Justin Herbert is a lot different quarterback than Lamar Jackson, like much different style of quarterback. So maybe he's able to run, a different flavor of Greg Roman, because he's not, it's not a Lamar offense, which you are kind of limited. You're not limited in a bad way, but you're on this side of the playbook. You're a playbook, like, in your mind, But it's a questionable one. And the Browns hiring Ken Dorsey. I guess the good news here is he won't call plays. Kevin Stefanski calls plays, but Dorsey, like, what have you seen from him in Buffalo that, like, yes, we can make him the offense coordinator? It was a pretty early hire. Like, he could have got better options. I don't really, again, not the end of the world. He's not calling plays. I just don't see the gain, from adding him. Then Luke Getsy for the Raiders. Some people, when it comes to the Bears, some people that say it was Justin Fields' fault. Some people saying it's Getsy's fault. I'm going to say both. I do think, in Getsy's defense, I've talked about this on Twitter, he tried to run like a West Coast style offense, earlier, and he like a pro style offense, and Fields just wasn't fitting it. Like, it wasn't working. And then Getsy kind of had to change his offense to fit Fields. So he hasn't really got a fair go, and he has that background with the Packers. He has the background with Devontae Adams. That's a positive thing. So we really don't know yet. Still to be determined, but there was still a lot of conservative play calling, and, it's where do you gain from this? Again, like, there's better options out there, so I don't love it. And then Liam Cohen, who bounced around college, NFL, college, back to the NFL, didn't go well with the Rams a year ago. I know they were beat up, but better in college. Yeah, it's just where do you gain from this? A big drop off to me from Dave Canales to Liam Cohen. I do like that he's experienced in both college and NFL, I guess, but it's not one that has a high probability of, like, being great, like being Dave Canales, nothing like that. The Falcons hiring Jimmy Lake. I guess the big thing here is Raheem Morris probably calls the defense, which is a good defensive coach. So not the end of the world. I think people think highly of Jimmy Lake, but man, when he was at Washington, it was a disaster. And that's college. So maybe it was a recruiting thing, going against Oregon, Utah, like those teams, just better rosters, because maybe you're not recruiting as well, but you're Washington, you should be able to find players better. They went to the national championship without him, obviously, quite a few years, but not quite a few years, but after, but it kind of lost his team. It was a shit show. So luckily he's not the head coach. He's not calling the defense, and he has a background in NFL and college. I guess that's good. So why not have him on the roster? But it's just a guy that, in my head, my recent memory is he led a shit show in a spot where it should not have been one. So, but any like the biggest one to me that I don't like is Kubiak. But are any of these like downright terrible hires? I don't think so. I'm not really saying that. the ones that look terrible, it's still like to be determined maybe. You know, Kubiak had one chance at it. Maybe learn from it. Maybe learn from Shanahan. Greg Roman, he's going to, you know, we're going to see a different portion of Greg Roman's philosophy on offense because it's not a Lamar Jackson offense. I get Dorsey, Lake. They're not calling their offense defenses. You know, Getsy, we actually get to see his offense and not a Fields offense, perhaps, depending on the quarterback. So Cohen gets a little bit more of a fair shot in the NFL here, so we'll see. So, people have been asking about this. I know it's probably not the most popular video compared to the head coaching one, but did want to talk this because it was an interesting cycle, coaching cycle here. Very interesting. But we have all kinds of offseason videos on the channel, trades, free agency, draft, cuts, all that. And a lot more to come. Excited about it. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on. Almost at 100K. GLD Shop, Liquid IV, code GOAT. Those are our sponsors. Links pinned in the comments. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.